This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/MacVoices. And by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacNotables on MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is the first of one of celebratory shows, I guess is probably the appropriate term, because MacNotables is now 10 years old.
Happy birthday!
First guy to talk to after our 10th anniversary is Mr. Bryan Chaffin of the Mac Observer. Bryan,
Woo!
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, happy anniversary, man. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, congratulations to everybody on the MacNotables panel. MacVoices' 10th anniversary is coming up in just a few days as well, so we will all become part of the 10-year club.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was going back through the archives just earlier this week and looking at everything, and we've covered a lot of territory.
Oh, yeah. Well, Apple's covered a lot of territory.
I guess everyone has in 10 years, but yeah, it's when you look back at some of the things that we were talking about when we first started, it almost seems kind of quaint by today's standards.
Give me an example.
Oh, shoot. I know one that jumped out at me is that, we had a big discussion over the video iPod. And that was after we started a ways, but that's one that was right there. And it's like, wow,
What was the source of was there a disagreement?
No, just, the impact and, the famous Steve Jobs quote that nobody wants to watch video on a device like that, and then they brought one out.
It's about the music, stupid, he said, quoting one of my favorite presidents.
Okay. Presidents?
That was he even noted at the time, he said to quote Bill Clinton, or to paraphrase Bill Clinton, it's about the music, stupid. Because Bill Clinton said it's about the economy, stupid. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Well, we have this little thing here called the internet, right? Is that what they call it?
Yeah, I've heard something about it.
Yeah. Okay, I got it right. It's about the economy. It's the economy, stupid. Okay. Was the phrase?
Yeah. So you're paraphrasing. I see.
Yeah. No, he was paraphrasing.
He was paraphrasing.
Yes.
All right.
So, I just wanted to make sure you realized that he was paraphrasing one of my favorite presidents, because I'm assuming he's one of your favorite presidents.
I think it's time to move on.
This, by the way, folks, is called Poking the Bear.
Yes, we already just had about a half an hour discussion on politics.
We did.
We came to the conclusion that we can't possibly agree, so we just decided to do the show. Bryan, there are a bunch of things I want to talk to you. I told you as an incentive to get you on this time that I was yelling at you the other day in the car as I was listening to I think it was Daily Observations. It was either Daily Observations or the Apple Context Machine. I honest to God don't remember which one.
Well, I know that I made a complete horrible mistake on ACM on the subject. So, but I think we also talked about it on TDO.
Okay. Well, the subject is the amount that Apple charges for anyone selling anything through the App Store, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is they take 30% cut.
Yes, but not always. There are some areas, and this is where I got yelled at by listeners and readers, and I probably should have had all that ready at my fingertips, but there are a couple of areas where they take less.
I don't think I knew that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I said otherwise for thousands and tens of thousands of people to hear. So, that's fantastic, right?
Well, hey,
Yeah. Anyway, there's a couple of I don't have that in front of me, but there's a couple of areas where they take less than 30%. But by and large, it's 30% off the top for Apple's cut, and 70% goes to the developer.
And I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I would like for you to tell me, though, that you seem to disagree that 30% was proper, reasonable and maybe should be compromised.
Ooh, interesting. No, I think that 30% for most things is just fine. Where I think 30% doesn't make any sense is when it comes to someone selling, say, physical goods or any kind of reseller situation. So that, and this was actually one of the areas where I got it wrong. You can shop on the Amazon app now, but when the Amazon app first came out, Apple wouldn't let shopping take place unless Amazon would give them 30%. And when you're a retailer selling physical goods, 30% doesn't exist. Those margins just don't exist. And in my opinion, iOS devices, the iPad in particular, should be the premier shopping platform anywhere. And sure enough, Apple ended up relaxing that, and you can buy stuff through the Amazon app and Apple doesn't get a 30% cut from it.
Interesting point, though. Do they get a cut as opposed to me ordering off the web? If I pick up my iPhone and order?
No, I don't think Apple's getting a cut from that at all.
I didn't think so.
You'll note that there's no Kindle store in the App Store, the web app.
Right.
And that's because Apple was insisting on 30% for that.
Okay.
And, to me, the iPad should be the best place to read Kindle books. I would recommend everybody buy their books from Amazon from iBooks, because I think Amazon is busily trying to destroy the publishing industry, as we've discussed in the past. But if you're going to buy your books from Kindle, I think that the iPad should be the premier place to read them. The web app is really, really good, but I don't think it's as good as a native app. It's certainly not as good as the iBooks app.
So you think 30% is okay?
I think 30% is okay for most things. It's certainly okay for the cost of app sales and for in-app purchases. It's where it gets trickier is when people are selling services that are tied to external IP. So, for instance, the streaming services. I think that that Apple probably. I don't know why I'm hedging. Apple should not be trying to get 30% from Spotify for in-app purchases.
And this may be where we diverge just a little bit, because I guess maybe I misheard you when I listened to it, but I look at it as Apple's bringing the department store, if you will. And it's a good department store. It's a very popular one, but it's also well maintained, well lit, air conditioned. So it may be a premium app department store, but it's still a department store. And if that's what they say they want, then
Apple's within its rights to demand 30% from Spotify. It just doesn't make any sense. That 30% doesn't exist. So, right? I mean, the margins on streaming music right now are tiny. Spotify doesn't make any money as it is. So giving Apple 30% is essentially, like knifing themselves in the gut, which is fine. That's not Apple's problem. But if Apple wants people to be listening to Spotify through the App Store, Apple should make a practical decision to enable subscriptions to be sold in such a way that doesn't make it problematic for a company like Spotify or Pandora or anyone else.
And I realize we're treading on antitrust grounds here, but at the same time, Apple does have a competing service. And
that makes it worse.
Well, that
makes it worse. Now Apple is putting its competitors at this completely artificial disadvantage.
Yeah, but
as a matter of fact, this didn't even come up. This didn't come up until Apple Music got launched. Spotify and Pandora and everybody else have been having to pay 30% for a long time. But it was fine, more or less. I'm sure they weren't happy about it. And what Spotify did in particular was raise their price to $12.99, which after 30% is actually still less than the $9.99 that they would get if people were buying it elsewhere, but whatever. My point being that everyone was on the same page. And so they were probably grumbling about it behind the scenes, but it wasn't really that big a deal. But now you bring Apple Music into the scene, and now Apple Music subscriptions are being sold for $9.99, and Apple's not having to pay that 30%, or if it does, it's getting it. They're paying it to themselves.
Yeah, exactly. They're paying it themselves. Back to the metaphor, they built the department store, and they were letting somebody else sell through it before, and now they're deciding that, hey, we're going to have a house brand too. And so is that really unfair?
It's incredibly unfair. It's
Why?
Incredibly unfair.
Why is it unfair if 2 days before Apple Music launched, Spotify and Pandora, and I'm a Pandora fan, but why was it okay if they were paying it then? 2 days later, it suddenly is unfair?
It wasn't okay that they were paying it then. It's just no one cared. Everyone was on the same page. This didn't become an issue until Apple started using this as this competitive club.
I'm not sure. Well, in the case of Spotify, perhaps. I mean, Pandora and Apple feel like
even if you want to hang your entire argument on the idea that it's Apple Store and they can do what they want, because that's true. It is Apple Store. Apple can do what it wants. It can do what it wants. And Apple doesn't have a monopoly on smartphones, and Apple doesn't have a monopoly on app downloads, and Apple doesn't have and Apple isn't even stopping Spotify from selling, or from allowing its App Store users access to a subscription paid elsewhere, right? Does that make, that's kind of a convoluted way to say that.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, boohoo, go cry yourself a river. If you want to hang your argument on it, that's fine. But how about let's look at it this way. When people go to the Spotify app that they've downloaded from the App Store, they'll see a subscription for $12.99 a month. If they go to the Spotify app on Google Play, they'll see a subscription for $9.99. That's because Google doesn't charge 30% for streaming services. So now Apple's platform is at a competitive disadvantage to Android because Apple is insisting on a 30% that does not exist. And that's the thing. They want 30% that doesn't exist. So the only way to make it exist is to charge more.
But therefore it exists, and it sounds like from what you said, that's what Spotify has done. So they've created the 30% that they need to pay Apple.
Yeah, and again, they're actually still bringing in less than the $9.99 they would be if they went elsewhere, because 30% of $12.99 is actually more than $3. But that puts Apple at a competitive disadvantage to anyone who's shopping between platforms. So it's in Apple's best interest to be reasonable and practical when it comes to making its platform the best in everything.
That's the first point that you've gotten to that I agree with. I think there is something to be said for making it the devices, the go-to the go-to devices for music. But it still just feels a little strange. It still feels a little strange because Spotify therefore is getting the benefit of Apple's platform, and Apple is supposed to give up the benefit fiscally.
Well,
because
flip that around. Apple is getting the benefit of selling devices because people can do things like listen to Spotify. It's a virtuous circle going here. And you're right. Spotify gets to profit off of Apple's awesome platform. It's true, but so what? There's the practical realities here are that this 30% doesn't exist. And by making it exist, i.e. charging more, it makes Apple devices look less good. And now you have the situation where Apple doesn't have to pay that same 30%. And then that becomes, I don't know if, I doubt that there are any antitrust violations here because, again, Apple doesn't have monopoly power in any of these areas. They have control of the App Store, but you don't have to be in the App Store. I do think that they're going to end up running aground of just unfair competition issues that the FTC has power over, and that's why the FTC has been investigating this. And they're investigating it because Spotify and Pandora most likely complained. But if there wasn't something to that complaint, they wouldn't still be investigating it.
I guess, okay, so I guess the thing that bothers me, and for accuracy's sake, let's just acknowledge that the $13 or $12.99 is not sufficient to bring in. So let's just pretend that it is for the sake of discussion. But Spotify didn't have to develop the iPad, the iPhone, the iPod. If they want, they can go out and do a music player, to create a Spotify music player, and see if they can get people to buy it. But they're benefiting from Apple's platform and Apple's devices, and Apple's charging everybody else 30%. So why shouldn't they pay 30%? I understand what you're saying. Apple's not paying 30%, but they had to incur the costs of developing those devices.
Yeah, but
promoting those devices,
they sell those devices for a profit. That has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with it because, yeah, you're right. They sell them for a profit, but then they also want to make money off of music.
I don't begrudge Apple the right to make money off the App Store. I don't begrudge Apple that right at all. I actually encourage that right. The problem is when that right gets asserted in places where it doesn't make sense to assert it. And that's when I have a problem. And for something like streaming music, for something like book sales, for something like probably even Netflix. I don't know what Netflix's deal is, but for other areas, it doesn't make sense for Apple to do it. There are practical considerations that I think trump the principle of it's mine, so I'm going to set the rules.
But if it's mine, do I have the right to shut down Spotify and Pandora on my devices?
Do you have the right to shut down to who? You, the consumer?
If I'm Apple and I say, you know what, to some degree, sort of what Amazon is doing, although it's not the best analogy, but Amazon is refusing to sell Apple TVs, Chromecasts in their store on the basis that, well, it confuses customers and it may not provide the optimum experience for Amazon Video.
We need to put quotes around that, though.
Yeah, well, lots of quotes, yeah.
Yeah.
But the point is that, okay, so they're sort of flipping that around. They're saying, okay, we're not going to sell your devices because we only want people to consume things on devices that we have a say in.
Yeah, Apple would probably be able to legally get away with kicking Spotify and Pandora and iHeartRadio and all the other ones off because it competes with Apple Music. As a matter of fact, I believe there's a clause, there certainly was a clause that said that services can't duplicate basic Apple services. Apple could probably do that. It would be stupid for Apple to do that, but Apple could probably get away with it. I don't think Apple should do it because, again, I think that when it comes to these consumption activities, these consumption-based services, I think that it's in Apple's best interest to have its platform be the premier destination.
And I would agree with that. I think maybe where we're disagreeing, though, is the dollar amounts. But if I want to use an iPad or iPhone and I want to use Spotify, should I pay more? No, I don't think you should pay more. Okay.
I mean, as a matter of fact, and one of the things, to me, what Apple should do, the practical solution for Apple to do here is to waive the 30% and charge transaction fees. I'm not wanting for Apple to incur the cost of people buying subscriptions, because there are costs that go along with this, right? But Apple should cover those costs and waive the 30% like Google does on Google Play Store, because again, that 30% doesn't exist.
You keep saying it doesn't exist, but if they've raised the prices, they've created the 30% because they've gotten me to pay that 30% more for their service to use on my iDevice.
Yes,
so
that's something that Apple doesn't have to do. So again, it could just. I don't even understand. I don't understand how you couldn't agree with me on this. I mean, this is such a logical choice to me.
I guess I admit I'm playing a bit of a devil's advocate position here, but at the same time, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, you're paying a premium. Theoretically, you're paying a premium for using Spotify on your iPad or iPhone. Now, I haven't done enough research into exactly how this works for Spotify, but if I subscribe to Spotify on the web,
yeah, you're going to pay $9.99,
right? And then
now again, Apple is expensive. That's not in Apple's best interest.
but wait a minute. If I have a Spotify ID that I bought on the web for $9.99,
yes,
I log into Spotify on
Yes.
my iPad,
you're good to go.
and I'm good to go. So if I don't mind jumping through that hoop, I can save my $9.99. Apple doesn't get the cut, and Spotify plays happily on my iPad.
Yes. Except for Apple, Spotify is actually prohibited from telling you that within the app.
Okay, well that's fair.
I guess. See, I mean, part of where this stems from is that Apple wants the Apple not only wants its cut, but Apple wants to maintain the integrity of the purchasing experience on the App Store, so that that we know as customers that when we download an app and we're buying something through an app, that it's legitimate. It is in Apple's great interest to ensure that, and part of this 30%. And part of the requirement, for instance, to not have a link to a place where you can go buy something on the web instead for cheaper, part of that is about controlling all of that integrity, ensuring that integrity. And I support that. I get that. I think there's and that's one of the things we get out of the walled gardens, the fact that we know that if we're going to do an in-app purchase, our credit card's not going to get stolen. We're not going to have weird charges showing up. We know what we're getting.
Right, and that all has value.
All that does have value, and that's one of the things that Spotify is certainly getting. However, when you look at a service like streaming music, where the prices and the royalties and all of this stuff were set up and predicated on transactions that didn't include a party like Apple being involved. That's why I say the 30% doesn't exist, right? When you're talking about those kinds of services, and in that it behooves Apple to have those services be a great experience on Apple's devices. Apple sells devices and makes profit from devices by having people listen, from people wanting to listen to Spotify on their devices. It becomes in Apple's best interest to be practical and reasonable about when it charges that 30%.
Samsung makes money by creating Android devices that people use to listen to Spotify.
Yeah.
Right. So Apple does, Samsung does, others do.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to use those devices, I'm sort of taking your comment to an extreme. But if I decide to go someplace else and buy Spotify, then I'm risking my credit card, and I'm risking my privacy, and I'm risking all those things that I'm going to be sold to because somebody more likely, well, I shouldn't say that. That's not fair. Quite possibly could take my email address and sell it, 25 times. And I don't know if Spotify requires a phone number, but same deal. With Apple, I'm comfortable that I'm not going to have any of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So Spotify has chosen to up the price on that platform. They're not allowed to tell me about that, but if I'm an informed consumer, then I found it out for myself, and if not, I'd make a decision to myself on whether buying Spotify is worth it. So basically
what I'm getting from you, Chuck, is that all practical considerations don't mean anything, and that Apple should just dogmatically stick to this notion where they get money, whether or not, no matter what it's going to make Apple look like, no matter what it's going to do to the experience, and no matter what kind of effect it actually has on both Apple and its products.
No, because
you are. Of course, that's not how you're saying it, but that is what you're saying. Well,
and again, devil's advocate to some degree, but I do think there's a gray zone in the middle. And folks, you may not agree with me. I may get lots of angry emails about this because you may think that you should have it at the lowest price possible. At the same time, though, I guarantee you can go out, everything from, the shirt, shoes, cooking ware. I mean, I look around you, the lamp that you have beside your bed, you can probably find cheaper somewhere. There are stores that are selling it at retail or at price X, and other stores that are selling it at 25% less price X. So it may depend on where you go. And if Apple is seen as a premium destination, they seem to command premium pricing on everything. Or is that to be expected? I don't think it's as unreasonable as you think it is. I do completely agree, though, with your comments about practicality. That if one of the Apple's goals is to make the iPhone, iPad, whatever the premier place to listen to music, then they would want to try to accommodate everybody's tastes and everybody's desire to listen to it on their service of choice.
Yeah. All right.
So,
yay! We've come to consensus.
Yeah.
I'm right. Yay!
Well, I don't know about that, but you're right at a price. Today's edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online training library. Get a free, full 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. In case you hadn't noticed, there's a lot going on in the Apple tech world right now. Apple has updated the Mac OS to El Capitan, iOS 9 is gaining more adoption each day and has lots of interesting new features, including some specifically designed for the iPhone 6s and iPhone 6s Plus. And let's not forget about Apple Watch, which extends Apple tech into the wearables space. There's a lot to keep up with, and there is, as you might expect, lots more coming. That's one reason you should look to lynda.com as an excellent source of training on all of these changes. With lynda.com, you can get an introduction to Mac OS X El Capitan's new features to get you up to speed quickly, or watch Mac OS X El Capitan Essential Training to go a bit more in depth with the new OS. For your iPhone and iPad, there's lynda.com's iOS 9 Essential Training to make sure that you're taking full advantage of all that the new mobile OS has to offer, whether you're running it on the latest iPhone or iPad, or on a legacy device. If you've just invested in an Apple Watch, then you're going to want to watch both Up and Running with Apple Watch, as well as Apple Watch OS 2 new features, so that you know all about the latest additions to your device. That's what's available now as I record this, and the odds are that there will be more titles in very short order. How do I know that? Because lynda.com adds new courses every week. They are approaching 4,000 titles and might be there by the time you hear this. But lynda.com doesn't just focus on Apple tech. In fact, they don't just focus on tech. lynda.com is a great place to get training on business, education, video production, and more. With lynda.com, one subscription gets you access to the entire library, so you might start with the OS 9 course, but veer off into accounting. Or watch an Apple Watch video, then decide you want to know more about leadership. No limits, no restrictions, no silos, just an amazing library of knowledge and information that is yours for the watching. You're going to get excited about what you can learn, what you will want to learn with lynda.com. To get started and find out just how much fun learning can be, sign up for a free 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices that gives you access to all of the courses I mentioned, plus a whole lot more. Watch as many as you want during your trial, then sign up and keep going. Whether it's for business or personal development, lynda.com is a resource you can't ignore. Again, lynda.com/MacVoices gets you a full free 10-day trial. Do it now and be learning in just a couple minutes. That's lynda.com/MacVoices for access to their unparalleled training library. Thanks to lynda.com for supporting MacVoices.
Well, so all right, let's look at what we do and don't agree and disagree on. We both agree that Apple's entitled to do this.
Yes.
We both agree that doing so actually makes Apple less competitive to some degree. Anyone shopping, anyone who's price shopping Spotify or Pandora and seeing the higher price tag in the App Store, that's going to have some negative effect on the people that are doing so.
Probably.
Well, and actually, definitely. The only room for argument there is how much of a negative effect. For instance, it could be negligible, right? It could not. It could actually result in not a single one less device sold. It's possible.
If I go with your original statement that you're price shopping and that's all you're doing and giving no consideration for anything else, then you are absolutely correct. But if I am giving value to other considerations, we move back to probably.
Okay. I was keeping it within the realm of price, but whatever.
Okay.
And we can probably both agree that Apple could waive its 30%, A, without hurting Apple, and B, keeping in mind that the ever increasing number of devices that it sells, because of something like Spotify being the same price there as it is anywhere else, that by ensuring that the iOS devices are the premium destination for consuming services like Spotify, that Apple's going to continue to make a profit from that, and that therefore it might end up being a wash.
Well,
and it's probably even better for Apple. So why not do the practical thing and waive it like Google does? Especially when Apple competes. Then I come back to that, man. That's just unfair. Apple has the right to do it, but it doesn't make it right.
No, you can't say that. No, you can't say that.
Well, I just did.
They have the right to do it because they set the terms for the platform and the device. And so, therefore, if you don't want to play by
if
their
Microsoft
rules,
was doing this, we would be screaming bloody murder. Apple fans all over the world would be screaming bloody murder. That Microsoft is being unfair, and they charge Apple 30% for Apple Music, but they don't have to pay it for Microsoft Music or some crappy service that Microsoft invented. It's good for the goose is good for the gander. Apple's competing with these guys,
except that Apple has, they are competing. They are competing, except that Apple has spent the time, the money, the effort to build the platform, to build the awareness, to build the experience that is the iPad.
Money from it.
Well, sure, that was the objective. That was the objective. So should they not be making some money from Spotify?
They have the right to make money from Spotify, but it's cutting off their nose to spite their face.
All right, so let's pretend you're in charge. How much would you cut the 30% down for Spotify?
Transactions plus maybe a small percentage for whatever kind of overhead goes along with processing transactions on Apple's part.
So basically,
just make it a wash. Make it a wash for Apple, because Spotify is going to be, for instance, Spotify is going to be having to pay transaction costs for its own transactions. Right, if Spotify processes the payment, it also is going to be paying some transaction costs.
Right.
So it's very reasonable for Apple to have those transaction costs covered, maybe even another percent or two. And here's where I don't have have access to any of the numbers. But whatever kind of costs that Apple is incurring from the downloads, from the sales, I don't know, just probably somewhere in between 3 and 5%. That'd be my guess.
So you basically would make it cost Spotify nothing to use Apple's platform.
Correct. I think that it's in Apple's best interest to do so, and it's fair.
That may have been up to the point where they became a provider, and again, this is where you start to tread on a little bit of antitrust ground. But they became a music provider in their own right, and so now, I can go and listen to. Assuming all things equal, I can listen to Spotify or I can listen to Apple Music. I'm hearing the same music. Again, let's assume that the quality issues are, everything is equal there. But now Spotify is using the platform for nothing. Apple has had to build the platform.
Yeah, okay. I'm okay with that.
And I'm not.
I'm okay with that because Apple benefits from this. Apple's getting a benefit from Spotify being there. I assure you that Apple is selling devices because Spotify offers a great experience on iPhone in particular.
Okay. I'll go with you on that. But
this is just one of those. This is one of those situations where the finances, the economics involved, don't work out for Apple to get its just desserts of this 30% cut. Just doesn't, the numbers aren't there.
I was with you on the physical goods. I'm still, I still feel a little bit strange about, and maybe that's my bias, that the music.
Well, if like, for instance, it's one thing when it's an in-app purchase, when it's something the developer has made, but we're talking about licensed content. There's X amount of money being paid for that licensed content. And that's why I keep saying that this 30% isn't there. Spotify doesn't make money as it is. Again, that's not Apple's problem. But and then sort of like take in all the things that I've been saying for the last half hour and repeat them.
Okay, so let's just pretend for a second that that we start talking about books.
Okay.
Same thing. Amazon should be allowed to sell a book without paying Apple a cut. That
is a great question. So we're talking about physical books or Kindles?
No, we'll do ebooks to try to make it as even as we can.
Yeah, Amazon should not be paying Apple a cut for selling Kindle books through the App Store. And the proof of that pudding is the Kindle web app. That's what Amazon had to do. They had to make a web app because they didn't want to pay. The margins didn't exist, especially for Amazon, for whom margins don't exist on anything they do, because the last thing they're interested in is actually making money, but whatever. And to get around that, they made a web app, and that web app is a very good web app, but it's not as good as a native app, and it's certainly not as good as iBooks. And that makes the iPad a less than perfect Kindle consumption device. Same thing with movies too. If someone's going to be streaming movies, I don't know how much Netflix pays. My guess is Netflix does not pay 30% for whatever that's worth. I don't know one way or the other, but my guess is that they're not paying 30%.
And I think I think we have to look at all this to make this a fair discussion. We got sort of hung up on music, but you have all these digital goods being delivered electronically, and I'm with you on having the best experience possible on these devices. It benefits Apple, no question about it, but it also is benefiting Amazon and Spotify and Pandora. And so I'm not sure that they shouldn't. Okay, maybe not 30%, but they should be paying something. And I'm not sure. I think it needs to be more than a wash transaction, because I think it just bothers me that they're getting the benefit of these devices and not paying any freight.
Kind of, that to me is akin to the record labels thinking that they should get a cut of hardware sales from the iPod because people listen to music on it. I mean, it's I get that you don't want these companies to get a free ride, but like dwelling on that for a company like Apple in the position that Apple is in, the nature of its platform, the nature of the services that it's offering, dwelling on that doesn't make any sense. It's not in Apple's best interest whether or not they deserve it.
But what you sound like you're saying because Apple is at this point in time well off financially, because they've got a lot of money in the bank, they're making money hand over fist, that they should change the rules a little bit, and that doesn't feel good. But it's more like this. Apple doesn't need the 30% to survive, but by cutting the 30%, it makes its platform better, which means that it ends up selling more devices and makes more money that way. And so I am happy for Apple to keep making more money. I want it to do so in a way that actually makes sense. We do agree on that. We do agree on that. And the thing is, neither one of us have access to the kind of details and numbers that we would need to make this a
to be fair,
definitive discussion.
I seldom rely on facts with any of my arguments. So
Yeah, you proved that in the political argument earlier. Yeah.
Actually, well,
No.
Was I factually wrong on any one thing? Was I factually wrong?
I don't know because I don't have all the facts.
Do you know? So you could. All right.
We're not going to do politics.
That was such a cop out, man. That was such a cop out.
No, it wasn't.
The reality is I did not say anything factually wrong. I said plenty of things you could disagree with, but I didn't say anything factually wrong.
I said there were facts I didn't have to support my conclusions. I don't think either one of us have all the facts. But
no, well, no one has all the facts.
Let's go to something that we do have all the facts on.
Okay.
Apple Music.
That's highly doubtful, but go ahead.
Well, I think we have the fact on. Did you stick with Apple Music? Are you sticking with Apple Music, or are you going to Spotify or another direction?
That's a great question. So I am still paying for Apple Music, and I've used it very little.
Interesting. Are you paying for and or using Spotify?
No.
Okay. Are you using any other music services?
No.
Do you listen to music?
I do. That's the interesting thing. I listen to a lot of music, except that I don't. So I can't listen. So usually these days when I listen to music the most is when I'm writing fiction. I've told you. I cannot listen to music while I'm writing for TMO. Mm-hmm. Tend to have a TV on. Cannot watch TV while I'm writing fiction. And I tend to have music on. And it needs to be in headphones. I don't like ambient music when I'm writing fiction. So that tends to be when I listen to music the most. I also like listening to music in a car, except for the fact that I'm an old white man. I listen to NPR when I'm driving around town. You're also an old white man, but I'm guessing you don't listen to NPR as much.
I will agree that I'm white, but I'm not sure that I'm going to cop anything else.
I'm just funning with this here. I listen to NPR a lot. So like when I end up going on road trips is when I listen to music. And so my intention was I went on a big road trip in August. I actually went to Texas for 3 weeks. And my intention was to listen to Apple Music and to do so through T-Mobile because they don't charge, Apple Music doesn't count against your data caps. And turned out that in between the cities, I couldn't get T-Mobile. So I ended up not being able to listen to Apple Music all that much. So, part of it is that I'm still coming from the standpoint where I prefer to own my music. I have listened to many things on Apple Music and will continue to listen to stuff on Apple Music, but I also listen to the playlist of the music I own. And then lastly, I would use Apple Music a lot to download stuff, except for the fact that I won't put my music into the iCloud music library because Apple's going to downgrade it from lossless to 256.
Okay, when you were talking about that's purchase music you're referring to.
No, you can download if to download a song from Apple Music for with my Apple Music subscription, you have to have the iCloud music library enabled. And I don't want to do that.
Okay. I don't think I realized that part.
Well, did you enable the iCloud music library?
I guess along comes now that you say that. I guess I did.
You would never have been told that you had to do it because you did it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a confluence of things. Plus, I'm super busy and I tend to procrastinate a lot. So you put everything together, and if I'm going to listen to streaming music, it's going to be with Apple Music. I like Beats Radio. Beats One, I guess it's actually called. I like that most of the time. But I kind of don't want to be listening to a radio. God, that's interesting. I don't like, you know what, Chuck? I don't like listening to new stuff when I'm writing. Because then I have to listen to it.
Yeah. You'd rather have something comforting that the backside of your brain knows what's coming.
Correct. Because otherwise I want to listen. I love music. I'm a musician. I love music. And especially when I'm listening on headphones, which is how I listen to music when I'm writing, I want to hear it. And if it's something new, I want to listen to what's going on. And especially when it's really interesting. So This is a realization live in front of your viewers here.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices and use the code MacVoices when you place your order. I'm really excited to welcome back Casper as a sponsor of Mac Voices. That's because I own and sleep on a Casper mattress, and I sleep very well. The folks at Casper are a bit obsessive about their mattresses. Obsessive in their desire to deliver a high-quality mattress at a shockingly fair price. Shockingly? If you've been shopping for a mattress recently, shockingly is the word for it. Mattresses are expensive, really expensive. Casper delivers a twin-size mattress for only $500 and a king-size for only $950. Now that's shocking, but in a good way, and if you use the code MacVoices, you save $50 off that price. Oh, and that's the price. No surprise shipping charges, no surprise service fees. Of course, the real question is, how good is the mattress? How well does it suit you? Casper mattresses are a combination of latex foam and memory foam that give you just the right sink, just the right bounce. Yes, those are mattress technical terms, to give you the best night's sleep possible. And let's not forget how you buy a Casper mattress. Just go to casper.com/MacVoices, pick your size, and your Casper mattress arrives at your doorstep. No annoying salespeople, no laying down on a mattress in a showroom floor trying to figure out what the difference is between this mattress and that. Just go to casper.com/MacVoices to get an American-made Casper mattress that you can try free for a full 100 days. In the unlikely event that it doesn't suit you, they have a painless return process. But believe me, after a week on a Casper, you're not about to return it. You're wondering if a Casper mattress can really be that good, right? There's only one way to find out. Right now, go to casper.com/MacVoices, pick the size mattress you need, and use the coupon code MacVoices to get $50 off their already amazing price. You're in for the best night's sleep you've had in a long time. That's casper.com/MacVoices to check them out, and the coupon code MacVoices to get $50 off your choice of a high-quality, American-made twin, queen, or king mattress. Welcome back, and thanks to Casper for their support of Mac Voices. I was really curious because knowing how much you love music, I was anxious to know just what your position was on Apple Music and how you'd been using it.
So I like it a lot. The interface is still a little bit wonky to me. There's things that aren't clear, some navigation issues that are wonky. I am happy to pay for it. I don't use it as much as I could. I assume that will change going forward. And at some point, I'm going to come to grips with my issue over the iCloud music library, and once I do that, I will actually probably be using Apple Music quite a bit.
Are you still, assuming we're talking about relatively mainstream stuff here, are you still purchasing music to own it, or are you just talking about the legacy stuff that you've stacked up like a lot of us have?
Yes, I am, except that I'm not. I haven't actually bought anything, but it's not because I've made a decision not to buy anything. Okay. I just haven't bought any music recently.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, but if okay, so
I would still go down to Rasputin Records, Bay Area music chain, and buy a CD. I would still absolutely do that. But I'm trying. The reality is, the music industry has shifted to the streaming model, and Apple giving us access to just about everything makes owning music pretty pointless at this point. The rental model makes a lot more sense unless you just don't buy anything ever. Like, you've already bought all of the music you're ever going to listen to and own. If that's the case, well, then paying to stream it doesn't make any sense. But if you are interested in new stuff that's coming out, I certainly am. And if you're interested in acquiring more music, even if it's stuff that has been released in prior years, streaming music is where the industry has gone. It's where the kids want to be. It's where by kids, I mean everyone that's younger than us, which, because we're old white men, is everybody. And I don't know where that's coming from. And so, yeah, I think maybe I'm just being a little change resistant here.
I think it's a fascinating discussion to have with people of all ages, because there is something about folks that are, well, of a certain age group, that there's still that desire to own the music, and it really doesn't make sense, because for the same price, really less than purchasing a CD a month, I can have access to thousands and thousands and thousands.
Almost everything.
Yeah, almost everything. That's one of the problems, and I won't speak for you. Sometimes some of my tastes are a little bit eclectic, and there's some things I have not been able to find on Spotify or Apple Music that I have to rely on ripping and uploading so that I have access to them. But for the most part, it's not like I'm going to go begging for things to listen to. It makes economic sense. But there is something still that's a little bit visceral about not.
Yeah, that's definitely that's where we're coming from, right? We grew up owning music, and I don't think either of us pirated, right? Were you a big Napster pirate?
No,
and neither was I, because I believe A, the quality was always awful, but B, it's very important to me not to steal music. And you can't get something for nothing. Eventually, that something's going to go away, and that's where we're coming from. But I know that the people who are coming up behind us, the vast majority of them don't feel that way. I wrote a piece about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, maybe more, arguing that that consumers have told musicians and the record labels alike that music is not worth what it was when you and I were, in our teens and 20s. Heck, when you and I were in our 30s, 35s, whatever. I don't know. Music isn't worth what it was. It's worth a lot less now.
Well, there's so much more of it.
There is a lot more of it, and it is available from legal means for a lot less, including services like Apple Music. And really, that means that the age of lots of musicians becoming wealthy by being musicians is pretty much over.
Yeah,
unless they make it through live performances,
right? And I think there's something to be said for that model.
Yeah, there is, except for making money from live performances is really hard.
Oh yeah. There's no question about it. But and we could get into a record label discussion here, but you have to question. You've heard too many stories about the record labels and the way they took advantage of artists. And,
sure.
The artists that seem to be the ones that are really well off were the ones that were able to manipulate things so that they could take over a lot of their own promotion and a lot of their
and the superstars,
yeah,
and there will continue to be superstars who become fabulously wealthy as musicians. But I think that the era of top 40 musicians of any particular genre, being wealthy, that's probably over with.
Yeah. I don't know. It's funny because I sat down at one point and just kind of wrote it all down on a tablet, and it said, okay, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why do I feel this connection with this little piece of plastic when I have access to all this music through my devices anywhere that I have connectivity? I can download it to my devices and put it there so that when I'm offline, I still have it. May not have as much, but I still have it, and I certainly have an equal amount, maybe even more than I would if I took the little plastic disc and ripped it to the computer. So, what am I doing? And yeah, by the way, I had to store all these things.
Well, for me, Chuck, it's not about having the plastic disc mostly, because when I get a CD, I rip it to my computer.
Right.
And then I carry my entire music library around with me, which is to me very valuable. But I like having the plastic disc so that I can re-rip it in the future when the next technology comes out. Like, that's one thing that I don't. Everything I rip lossless, and it's very important to me to do so. I can't always tell the difference between, say, a 256 file and a lossless file, but sometimes I can. And I really want the option of being able to convert that, if I need to the next way of listening to music. And so that's one reason why I want to have the physical discs there, so that I can always get them again. But then I also, like, the way I listen to music, I tend to either listen to albums, or I listen to my 4- and 5-star playlist, or my 5-star playlist. Right. So I go through everything that comes through. I rate, and then, like I said, I use that through the playlist. I seldom put my entire library on shuffle. Instead, I'll go listen to an album if I want to do that.
Yeah.
I like listening to albums in order. If I'm going to listen to an album, I want to listen to it in order.
That's interesting. Now, I'll listen to an album. I won't necessarily listen to it in order. I have no problem with. In fact, I just pulled up a new album the other night and hit shuffle so that it's bouncing all around.
I want to hear it in the order that the artist, or at least their producers and labels, wanted it heard. Especially when it's the artist. When it's having been involved with making an album, there's great choices. It's actually hard deciding what should go where, and I want to hear it like the artist intended.
Okay, that's fair. You've had that experience. I haven't, and I think
and it's subjective. Most people aren't obsessive like that on stuff like that, like me.
Yeah, but it also makes a certain amount of sense that if the artist intentionally wanted it consumed in that particular order, that they had a reason for it, and you try it once, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. But at least respect that, and I do. So, interesting. 10 years.
10 years, man.
10 years.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations to you.
You've done a great job, dude.
To everybody. Hey, it's,
Stop giving credit to us, man. You're the one who has made this happen. You are so good at this, dude. You're so good at this. And you are especially good at managing panels. I've told you that 1,000 times, but I want to make sure your listeners hear it, too.
Yeah. I appreciate it. But I have so much respect for everybody that came on the MacNotables panel, and really nobody left, with the exception of Chris. And of course, Chris stepped over to Apple. So as I think he said on the show, his public persona, had to go away. But other than that, it's just been a great team.
Which is a shame.
Yeah, it is. But, I think it's, from what I understand, it's been a good move for him.
Absolutely. No, I resent the loss of Chris's public presence and his public persona because he's a great guy personally, but his public presentation is separately great. Yeah,
I agree. I
Yeah.
I do miss having him on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So. Which means that you got to do more duties and get back on here more often.
Okay. I'm always happy to be here.
Great.
Always.
Great. Well, and Bryan and I will be starting a new election year podcast soon, so that you can hear us.
It's going to be called "I'm Right and He's Wrong."
Yeah. and that's going to be the way we open it.
Yeah, exactly.
Bryan, it's good to see you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacNotables on MacVoices. We will be back soon. Another 10 years coming up. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.